It's 2024, which means it's time to get the drift car back out and ready for the season, which means new tires. And I've gotten asked a million times what drift tires I'm running for the 2022 Toyota GR86 that's right behind me, which, by the way, I'm Alex Martini. Welcome to Torque Motorsport. I'm over here actually to talk a little bit about drifting, the drift community, and of course our upcoming game that is free to play right now, early access over on Epic Games Store, called Torque Drift 2. There's been over 350 people. That's lame. There's been over 350,000 people, that's way cooler, that have downloaded the game and played it, and it's been an absolute blast to hear the feedback so far. The game's only been out for about 6 months. We're doing releases every single month, and the feedback, both critical and super positive, has been awesome. We take that feedback super serious, and every single month when we do another release, we've got more great stuff for all of you. The 0.8 release just dropped. It's got new cars, new parts, and the ability to go drift with your friends, and an even better experience on controller and on the sim rig. So if you're bored, you want to give it a shot, head on over to the Epic Games Store, download Torque Drift 2 for free. Now behind me is the 2022 Toyota GR86. I spent, I think, 5 events last summer drifting this car. Now you might be thinking that's not a lot, but when you consider there's only 6 events of the whole season before it starts to snow again, it starts to realize that we got out there as much as we could. And very quickly we found ourselves in need of tires. For everybody, I'm gonna say it like this. Drift tires are a little bit like a butthole, okay? Everybody has one in terms of opinions on them, and they kind of all stink. So take my opinion with a grain of salt. A lot of times I've seen people on the internet talk about how tread wear is the most important thing. They want a 200 tread wear, 200 tread wear, 200 tread. That's a grippy bitch, okay? Okay, now I'm not gonna pretend I know everything about drifting. I don't. I get yelled at constantly, but the good thing is I usually don't make the same mistake twice. The tread wear number is only really gonna start playing an effect on what you want when you get into the high horsepower numbers. When you've got a low horsepower car like good old GR86 or a Mazda Miata, you don't want the tire to be grippier. I can almost promise you that. You want the tire to be less grippy. So for me, and for what we've got Nexen and Farah SU1s. These are 225/45 ZR18s that we've got right here, and there's a couple different reasons why we chose to go with these first. Now, number one, the wheel and tire setup behind me on the GR86 is actually a staggered setup. The fronts are 8.5s and the backs are 9.5s. They're Koenigs. I actually really like this wheel design. I think it looks killer on the GR86 with its like swooping lines. We wanted to go with a square tire setup, so then that way if we do need to switch out the front and rears for the sake of just surviving, we can do that. The Farah, the SU1s, I ran these all year last year and I really enjoyed them. I think for the most part I ran 225/45 like the whole year. Even on the Gloria when I drifted it, I did the same exact thing. There's a couple reasons why I like this tire more than most though. Number one is that sidewall is super soft. I like that a lot because when I end up stretching a tire a little bit specifically for drifting, I like that it's got a little bit of flex. These also heat cycle super well in my opinion. For the price point, there's not a whole lot out there that you can beat, but I really like the fact that these heat cycle super well. If you guys are wondering how to keep your tires lasting longer and you're out there drifting for the first couple times, the best tip that I could give you is something somebody gave to me, and that's go run a few laps, come off, cool the tires down either with like a hose or just in standing water, cool the tires off, let them rest for a little bit, and then go back out there again. You kind of have to treat your tires like a living, breathing organism when you're out there on the racetrack, because how they are now cold changes when they warm up. The actual compound inside this rubber silica changes depending on what you're throwing at it. And a lot of times what you're throwing at it in drifting is a lot of lateral G's. You're warming up the side of these contact patches an absolute ton. And what happens over time is that it'll start to change the shape or the compound that's happening inside these shoulder blocks, or in these tread blocks, I'm sorry. And so you want to get those cooled down so they can retain their shape. You also don't have rubber essentially coming off the tire, and you don't have to worry about delaminating. Now, for me, another reason that I really love these tires is because they come in a million different sizes. So these are 225/40 18s. We also ran a set of SU1s on some 17s. We see them all over in 19s. I think they go from 15 to 19, which means you can kind of run them on pretty much anything. If you've got a Corvette, a lot of people are jumping onto that chassis for some grassroots drifting, and I really enjoy it. Another thing that's probably gonna sound a little bit like a loser opinion in it, but I want you to hear me out. I really like the fact that I can daily drive on these tires as well. Sometimes this good old GR86 goes drifting on, Sunday, and then the following Thursday, we drive it to St. Louis for a Formula Drift event, which we actually did. And we did it on the same exact tires that we were drifting on. Now, it's not necessarily recommended that you do that, but the fact that I was able to do so confidently and we were going through a rainstorm that looked like I was about to fly off the highway speaks to the fact that these tires do well as just a standard performance. I would probably call it it summer tire. I wouldn't definitely get this into the winter time, but that has a lot to do with the channels that you have here. The channels here are essentially just what evacuate the rainwater. And a lot of times, the bigger or longer channels that you have, the less traction you're gonna have as well, which actually ain't too bad for drifting. Now, I think they're gonna talk a little bit about shoulder block technology on this. I'm gonna be super honest with you guys. When it comes to Nexen, I'm not as familiar with the type of technology or the types of cords that they use inside the tire. So don't quote me on that. I do have a lot of experience more on the grip side of things, but what I can say is these have held up super well in terms of just overall performance on the track. I haven't had to deal with a debeating issue. I haven't had to deal with a heavy delaminating issue or anything like that, but that's also because I'm maintaining the tires as well as I can. If you're on the fence about getting a good drift tire, honestly, I'd recommend the SU1. There's a couple others that I'd recommend as well, but honestly, if you're looking for something, this seems to have really gotten the job done for me. We have them for the entire season with the GR86, which I think is really awesome. And on top of that, I'm gonna be really honest with you guys, Nexen's also in Torque Drift 2, and so they wanted us to actually just try the tires last year, and I told them, yeah, I'd be willing to try it, but I will give you my honest feedback, and if I don't like them, I am unfortunately going to tell you. Then it makes it awkward for all of us, because most influencers just talk about how awesome everything is, and they were actually really good. So we're gonna be running them again for 2024. We have more horsepower coming out of these cars in 2024 as well, so we're gonna see how they hold up. But so far, 200 horsepower, 225 horsepower, and Gels' car has like 80 horsepower. They've done super well. The final tip I'll give you though is this. If you're already writing your hate-filled, angry, huff and puff, blow the house down opinion on what drift tires to run, remember that the #1 thing you can do to have a good set of drift tires is maintain them. Taking care of them and understanding they're all going to behave better when you treat them better is the biggest thing that you can learn. Heat cycles are a huge thing with tires. Also, just keeping an eye on how they're behaving is equally important. Remember, changing your tire pressure inside when you're actually running, when it's at temp, is gonna have a monstrous effect on how the car slides, both with your front wheels and your back wheels. As you start getting more heat into the tires, your pressure is also gonna increase along with that, which can sometimes cause the tires to perform differently. Keep an eye on that, because you can play with your tire pressure to also increase or decrease the amount of traction you have on the track, and sometimes that matters a hell of a lot more with low horsepower cars than the type of tire you have to start with. As a 300 treadwear, I think it does really well. I wouldn't go any lower. I don't know if I'd go any higher. They seem to get the job done for all of it, and hopefully you learned 1 or 2 things about getting some drift tires for the summer. But you'll have to let me know what you think in the comments if you haven't already. And of course, if you didn't hear, we are taking this bad boy drifting for another season. So if there's someplace you want us to go and drift either with the community or at a grassroots event, let us know in the comments below. We're gonna be doing a big tour, and on top of that, we'll be giving away all sorts of giveaway freebies for Torque Drift 2. Now, go download Torque Drift 2. It's for free on the Epic Games Store. I'm Alex Martini. We hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you on the next one. Adios.